Fury, former Obama campaign foreign policy advisor and former State Department official. David, thank you so much for your time today. So we just heard from Kelly in Anchorage, just heard from Robert there in Kyiv. What is most important right now ahead of this meeting between these two world leaders?
Well, first of all, I think President Trump has done something wise over the last few days, which is he has lowered expectations. And he's basically said, don't expect we're going to get a deal at this summit. But I also agree with Congressman Adam Smith, who just played there, that he needs to get something. And what President Trump needs to convey to Putin is that there will be consequences if a ceasefire is not forthcoming soon. And the consequences have to be the sanctions that Trump promised, which are a combination apparently of sanctions and secondary tariffs intended to punish those companies and those countries that are buying Russian oil. And it also has to be a strong statement by President Trump that if we don't get a ceasefire, I'm going to continue to sell U.S. weapons and weapons systems to Ukraine. Those are the two things that Putin is most worried about. If he doesn't think those things are going to happen, he really has no reason to come in good faith and enter into real ceasefire negotiations. If things went really well, what President Trump could accomplish is a short-term ceasefire. In other words, a cessation of hostilities for a short-term period while they negotiate a longer-term ceasefire. I don't expect that to happen, but that would be the best outcome.
All right, so you don't expect it. That would be the best. David, do you think real progress, however we define that, will be made? You know, especially since there are already plenty of detractors who think tomorrow's meeting can't really be successful without Ukraine's president being involved.
I'm a glass half full person. I'm an optimist, so I want to leave it open to the possibility that something good could come out of this. But I'm very skeptical based on all of the other previous interactions with Putin. And as Robert Sherman reported earlier, you had him on, he said that the things that are coming out of the Kremlin and from Putin suggest that he really wants a ceasefire. But what I would note is that although he says he wants a ceasefire, Putin hasn't actually put anything forward that he is going to do in terms of concessions. He hasn't agreed to give up Ukrainian territory that they've taken illegally. He hasn't agreed to allow there to be security guarantees to Ukraine in case Russia breaks a future ceasefire. He hasn't agreed to European troops being in Ukraine to monitor a ceasefire. Until he starts making those types of concessions, it's hard to believe that he's really going to enter into the type of ceasefire that would be lasting and fruitful for the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, you know, especially as we know, the war is currently still raging on. I mean, we just heard from Robert there. At this point, David, do you think there is any way Zelensky is included tomorrow?
Anything is possible. Maybe he's been put on standby. It's going to be hard for him to get all the way from Ukraine to Alaska on short notice, but we don't know what might have been planned. Obviously, President Zelensky has to worry about his security. He can't just rush into a meeting, rush into travel. He is a target for Russia, so I don't expect he's going to be able to show up with, very little planning, but maybe there's something in the works.
So I'd like to listen to a little bit of what President Zelensky had to say about getting to a ceasefire.
There must be a ceasefire. Number one, there must be really reliable security guarantees. Today, by the way, President Trump spoke about supporting this and about America's readiness to participate. Sanctions must be in place, and they must be strengthened if Russia does not agree to a ceasefire in Alaska.
All right, so David, I know we've talked about this before, but do you think there is any path to peace, any path to a ceasefire that does not include some type of territorial changes, some type of border changes?
First of all, what President Zelensky said there is, confirming what I was saying, which is he needs some of these things to do a ceasefire, like the security guarantees. It's hard to imagine that Putin is going to agree to a ceasefire if he doesn't get to keep some of the land that he has taken from Ukraine. President Zelensky has publicly said he's not going to give up any land. In fact, he cannot legally without the approval of the parliament. But I do think it's possible that Ukraine could cede some territory in a trade for a ceasefire, but it has to have those security guarantees and other assurances to Ukraine that if they give away land to Russia, they're going to have a lasting ceasefire. I would also note that some of the land that Russia has taken, which it started taking in 2014, it's been dominated by Russia. The local government is run by Russia. The police are run by Russia. The schools are teaching in Russian. So it would be actually kind of hard for Ukraine to take that territory back and control it. And so maybe for that reason also, while President Zelensky says he doesn't want to give up territory, he realizes realistically he might need to.
All right. So, David, if this face-to-face meeting tomorrow doesn't, result in any significant change, what do you think America's involvement and position needs to look like from here on out?
Well, President Trump needs to follow up on his threat to institute new sanctions. Remember, that was the Friday deadline last week that he pushed off in order to do this summit meeting. But if there's no ceasefire and there's no good faith negotiating by President Putin, he should slap those sanctions on immediately. And again, I'm talking about secondary sanctions and also what President Trump calls secondary tariffs to punish those countries that are buying Russian oil, principally India and China, but there are others too that are involved, and the companies that make it possible, including banks and shipping companies from both of those countries. That would really hurt the revenues that Russia needs to continue to support the war machine.
All right, David Tafuri, always appreciate